Hello and welcome to this video on The Returned. This is the audience lesson, and in this session we are aiming to consider how the show appeals to and attracts different audiences, and we're also going to look at critical and audience responses compared to that preferred reading. First of all though, a bit of a big question about TV. It's said that we're living in a golden era of television and that's been around for the past 20 years or so. Some may suggest that we're out of that era now, but without a doubt there has been a run of incredibly high profile television shows produced by mainstream broadcasters, as well as appearing on streaming services as well. So thinking about that, what do modern audiences want from TV? Do they want something that is fresh, original, or different? Or are they more interested in the substance? Are they looking for something that has depth, relevance, ideologies? So have a think about this. You should have done some research on this topic already, seeing as we are in the midst of our second television product of this exam. Think about examples of the shows that do maybe one of these two things, either offer something stylish or give us something with depth, but maybe don't do both. What about humour, drama, action? Are these substitutes for character depth? Can you get just as much from a TV show that is engaging on a visceral, emotive level than perhaps one that engages us intellectually? Are there shows that do all of these things, that offer us a kind of aesthetic and an immediate emotional response, but also challenge us and allow us to explore a show's depth? And in an era where we see a number of shows being allegorical to the real world, saying something about the society we live in, does a show have to do this to be relevant? Okay, this was just an opportunity to get all of those thoughts into one answer. It's quite a discussion, it'd be more for a debate, but I'm curious about what you think, so get your answers down. So, who are our target audience for The Returned, or Les Revenants? As you know, we always look at different ways of classifying audiences in media studies, and those main ones are a psychographic profiling, where we look at the needs, the beliefs, an in-depth understanding of who that audience is. We look at demographic profiling, which is where we collect a bunch of facts about that person or those people, but also we can look at whether or not something is a part of a niche audience, a more specialised audience. And is there more than one? Okay. So I want you to have a little think about this, okay, get down a variety of different bits of information from a demographic and psychographic perspective on who the audience is. But we also need to consider how these audiences are targeted. Now, of course, to get someone to watch the show, you don't only have the text itself, which is obviously the main draw to watching it, but first of all, you have to encourage people to watch it in the first place. So what about the marketing? Okay. So, again, consider both the text itself, the shows, particularly episode 1, which is our set product, but also think about those posters, those trailers. How does that reach the target audience you outlined in the earlier question? So here's a quick checklist. Make notes on any of these that you didn't get already in your list of target audiences and how they're being targeted. So we have our primary target audience, which may well be fans of the zombie or supernatural texts. They would be fairly mainstream, probably of an age of 15 or above, due to the sort of prime time nature of the broadcast of this show. But it does have cross-gender appeal, of course. There are appeals to male audiences, which might identify with characters such as Simon. Okay, there are female audiences of different ages, which may identify with any number of the female characters, whether that's Camille or Adele, possibly even Lena or Julie. From the vowels segmentation, experiences may enjoy that vicarious thrill of the genre and the shifting nature of it. Now, the Channel 4 audience is traditionally ABC One, so they may also be attracted to the kind of highbrow kudos of the text because it is subtitled, a foreign language text. Similarly, audiences of fans, for example, of Nordic noir, different countries producing different genres of TV shows. There's also a secondary audience here, maybe a more alternative or niche audience, younger fans. Some of the marketing that was involved, some of the kind of more experimental stuff, some of it that was a bit more challenging, and also the prospect of something that was a bit more multi-platform. And there might be fans of the alternative, things that reach maybe our explorer audience from the Four Seas, who might enjoy the non-linear nature of it, the surreal nature, the fact that not everything makes sense, that lack of narrative closure which drives some people mad, would be an appeal to some who enjoy something that's a little bit less straightforward. And then you might get some inherited fan bases, people who quite like maybe the old box set television, or fans of other AMC shows like The Walking Dead or even Twin Peaks. So moving on from targeting to audience responses. Now, audiences can obviously respond to texts in the way that they use them. We need to consider how audiences might have various uses for the returned, and this takes us back to the uses and gratifications model. Identification, diversion or escapism, the fact that there are so many Enigma codes in here, as well as being able to socially interact about the show. And that also has its own knock-on effect of following the ideas of other people, their testimonials, or of course the success of the show. So before we jump into the kind of responses that have been made of this TV show, I'd like you to do some research into the success that the show has enjoyed. Okay, so these are the things to look for as a criteria for success: the audience figures, any awards that the show won, responses from the audience. So you can look on the Internet Movie Database for this, but of course Rotten Tomatoes as well. The impact of social media. So if you go back into the social media channels and profiles that exist for the returned, you might see the interaction from the audience. And also have a look at the other versions of this TV show that were made. It, of course, had an American remake that was fairly short-lived. And one thing you must do is look online for some specific reviews. Write down quotations about the appeals of the show, but vitally where the preferred reading was made. And, of course, look out for those maybe more negative reviews where oppositional and negotiated readings have been taken. Always keep a note of where that review is from as well. So let's have a look at some of these responses based on the uses and gratifications model. Okay, so give yourself a chance, some time to analyse the show based on identification, escapism, Enigma codes, and social interaction. Well, here we go. I'm sure you've got some of the same things as this. In terms of social and social interaction goes, this is the kind of thing that audiences will talk about or tweet about or comment or follow on social media. It might be about solving the intellectual puzzle. It may be different theories that are out there. Also, audiences are quite good at talking about media products when they compare themselves to their own characters. A kind of what would you do situation. Would you respond in the same way as the characters have done? Does it surprise you? Does it feel realistic? And that links obviously to identification. Which of the characters do people identify with? What about the themes? You know, this show might be fairly niche, but its themes are universal. There is bereavement, there is loss. There are family relationships. Ultimately, though, this show's unusualness and its uniqueness is a form of diversion or escapism. Audiences can use the text for that reason. There is elements of fantasy, surrealism. It diverts us from our own mundane existences and day-to-day. Also, the non-linear narrative helps with this. There is that diversionary appeal of the development of relationships between the characters, particularly Simon and Adele, that bittersweet love story, but also family focuses, which might hold appeal for a more stereotypically female audience. Plenty of Enigma codes here. Where do we even start? Okay, you should have listed at least 10 different Enigma codes. My favourites are, who is Victor? We don't really learn that, and when we do, there's quite nice twists. Why is the dam receding? Is that question ever really answered? And then, of course, we've got testimonials on things like the DVD covers or quotes in magazines and so on. Okay, the two-step flow comes into play here as an audience theory. We don't necessarily watch products, but we do just because of the marketing. But maybe we take other people's opinions. Maybe we look for opinion leaders to guide us as to whether we should consume a text. So as we move on to the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about the reviews of the show, and we will hear 2 reviews from radio stations and vlogs, okay, that tackle what the show has been about and their own particular reading of it. All I'd like you to do through those videos is to make notes on what the reviewers are saying about the show and whether or not you feel they have taken a preferred, negotiated or oppositional reading.
Kerrang! Radio.
Hi everyone, today I'm reviewing the French TV show The Returned. The first season consists of 8 episodes and was aired in 2012, and the second season is set to be broadcast in 2015. So a number of years will have passed between the first and second season, and I'm hoping that's really down to the fact that the writers simply wanted more time in order to maintain the quality of the show. I watched the show a week or so ago and I absolutely loved it. It really stayed with me, and actually the more I thought about it, the more I realised how much I enjoyed it. So that's really why I'm reviewing it today. The story focuses on a small French town / village where, without any explanation, the dead start reappearing, and they haven't aged at all, and they try to reintegrate themselves back into the community and back into the lives of their living family and friends, which cause a number of repercussions. And as the stories progress, we can actually see that the townspeople start experiencing lots of strange phenomena. For example, a number of them have strange lesions appear on their skin, the water level in the local dam lowers without any explanation, and they experience a number of power outages. So the show takes itself actually quite seriously, and they also take the concept of the dead coming back to life quite seriously. So we end up believing it and really buying into the concept, and we get drawn into a number of storylines and into the lives of a number of different characters. And that setup actually reminded me a bit of Twin Peaks. I'm not the first person to have compared the show to Twin Peaks. A number of people online have as well. However, Twin Peaks is a lot more playful, a lot more vibrant, whereas this show, as I've said already, takes itself very seriously. And that's not a critique. I actually liked the show all the more for that, because the concept could have become ridiculous, but in the hands of the creators, it didn't. So the show itself is actually based on a film, a French film called They Came Back, which also deals with the dead coming back to life. And we can actually think of both the film and the TV show as dealing with the modern zombie. And I really like the way they depict the dead. It's very intriguing because these zombies, as I'll call them for now, they actually don't know that they're dead. And when they realise, they have to struggle with this new identity. The cast on the show do a fantastic job. They're a really good bunch of actors, and they all seem to pull together and they work very well together. My favourite storyline of the show is by far the one that involves Camille. She's a feisty teenager. She's a brilliant actress, and she's a feisty teenager who comes back to life and tries to come back to her family, and she actually finds it very, very difficult. This show has had a number of international broadcasts, but I still don't believe that it's that well known, because it's only ever been recommended to me once, and that's actually unusual for a good TV show. I know a number of people who are subscribed to this channel have actually seen this, because I did tweet it out, and a number of you said that you'd seen it, but that's really because the people who watch this channel are really into film and TV. So if you haven't seen it, I would recommend that you check it out on Netflix. It's available, and because it's only 8 episodes, it's not as intimidating as, say, a 7-season TV show. So that kind of concludes my review, guys, and as always, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next week. Bye!
Okay, so that was the London City Girl vlog on the show. Okay, the next one up is a review from Kerrang! Radio. So same deal again, make some notes on what they see to be the appeals and their response. Do you feel that that's a preferred, negotiated or oppositional reading?
Kerrang! Radio's Loz and Keith.
So here we are. Good morning, James.
Yeah, I can't believe it's the last time.
It is. I mean, this has been... I've absolutely loved it, I have to say, talking to you, which must have been every week for, what, I don't know, 3 or 4 years
Something
now?
like that, yeah.
Here on the station. And you've introduced me and hopefully, you know, the listeners as well to some wonderful, wonderful televisual treats over the years as well. So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure, totally. Thanks for having me. And also, at the same time, that it happens to have coincided with the 3 most traumatic seasons for Aston Villa that I can remember. Some 3 really terrible seasons, so it's been a good drama in that sense as well.
It has. And talking of dramas, just in case you were about to give me any spoilers, I haven't watched the final episode of The Fall yet. We've taped it.
Nice one.
So we've got that to come tonight when I get home, which, upon your recommendation, has been absolutely brilliant. Is there anything that you're recommending just finally to go out on today that people should watch?
There's a French drama that started on Sunday night on Channel 4, The Return, which is excellent.
You won't believe it, but I've actually started watching it.
Oh, you have? Fantastic.
Yes. You know, all these years later, you finally recommend something that I'm actually watching at the same time.
Brilliant. Now, this was sold in the marketing as a French zombie drama, and it actually quite isn't. There are people returning from the dead, but in a zombie drama, typically in movies, films and books, the laws of nature are respected. I know there are dead people walking around, but it seems to be because some kind of infection. You know, in 28 days later, they actually name it's the rage virus. But in this one, dead people are just appearing after about 4 years, 10 years, 30 years.
It's almost supernatural more than...
That's exactly what it is, yeah. Now, the first person we see is a girl called Camille. Now, Camille was killed in a school bus disaster. They're going on a mountain path and the bus plunges over the precipice.
It's a very dramatic start, actually.
Oh, totally. And when she turns up at her mum's place, she's all, "Oh, what's for dinner, mum?" And her mum...
As if it just happened yesterday.
Exactly. And also, it's not just this... There isn't this just 4 years thing. Simon from 10 years ago, who died 10 years ago, he turns up at his girlfriend's place and is wondering why she isn't there. And no one seems to have heard of this Adele. He eventually tracks her down. She's married with a kid to someone else.
Yes.
And he doesn't know what's going on. She's screaming, crying.
So they've all died at different points.
Yes, absolutely. It took me a while to work this one out.
I hadn't figured that out.
Yeah, well...
I thought they were all on the same bus.
No.
Oh.
She was 4 years now. Simon's about 10 years. Then Mr. Costa, the old guy... Do you remember him?
Yes.
He's there with a much younger woman. That's his wife from 30 years previous.
Oh, I see.
I'm really interested in the rules of this universe because he's so traumatized by the vision of her that he ties her up, puts a gag in her, burns the house down. When the fire people come to investigate it, they say, "Oh, there were no bodies in the house." So what does that mean about this universe? Because these people are in corporeal form. You know, they walk, talk, they drink and eat.
They look normal, yes.
Yeah. But how did Mrs. Costa escape the fire? And also, we see a waitress stabbed to death in an underpass, and that seems really brutal and motiveless. But the guy who stabs her says, "It's all over now," as if there's some purpose to it. Now, does that mean that you have to kill someone for someone to come back? And all these revenants, as they call them in France, what do? Do they get older now, or do they just stay frozen in time, trying to come to terms with like everyone else moving on 10, 30 years?
I see. So much you noticed that I didn't.
I'll be honest, I did have to read quite a few recaps to get on this, because it's particularly in the subtitle drama. And what I like about this one is that it doesn't seem in a rush to explain things to you. It just sets out this universe where people come back. And the parents' reaction at first is just kind of, her mum goes, "Oh," and just carries on with the day. But like she knows something's up because this girl's dead. But she doesn't scream and cry and hug her at first, does she?
No.
She lets her have a bath, and then she's like...
I did think it was odd.
And I think that's really clever how they're doing that. They're just letting the mystery unfold slowly. I think it's obviously trying to make a comment about grief or about how we move on from things and how we change, you know, when everything else has stayed the same. So I'm really recommending this. It reminded me quite a bit of that the vampire film, Let the Right One In. It's got that same really calm, really kind of odd kind of feel.
And menacing as well.
Yeah, but, you know, not quite like a horror film. More like, I'd say, a supernatural chiller.
Yeah.
But I'm impressed with the direction, impressed with the performances. I'm impressed that it's very happy being what it is, and I don't think it's a zombie drama.
Okay, well, I look forward to seeing episode 2, which will be next Sunday. It is Sunday, isn't it?
It is, Channel 4 at 9 o'clock.
That's it, The Returned. And I think just in finishing, James, thank you so much for the past few years. I very much enjoyed it, loved your recommendations. And finally, if people want to find out more about what you do, where do they go?
They go to arieltelly.co.uk, and thanks a lot for having me.
Thanks, James.
Okay, so there you go, another take on the show itself. Let's just fly back to the success that you should have researched. Here's a few statistics. If you didn't get these, you can add to them. International Emmy for Best Drama Series, a Peabody Award, 100% on Rotten Tomatoes when it was first out. Its Facebook profile when it was at its height was, significant. There are Facebook fan sites and fan fiction, which we'll get onto later when we apply Jenkins. So there's various successes here. Of course, the best thing to do with all this information is to decide which successes are the most significant. Okay, we've had a listen to the reviews. Okay, and so hopefully you should be able to compare those responses to the ones that you found earlier on. Let's move on into looking at the appeals of the show, or in other words, the audience pleasures. Okay, so let's think about the appeals for a while. What would you list as being the main appeals of the show? Can you think of maybe 5, 6, or even 7 different appeals? Well, a lot of these are very typical of TV drama, but we have things like fulfilling expectations. Okay, that's classic Steve Neal territory, isn't it? Building on those expectations, looking at what we would maybe find challenging about that as well. There's also the pleasure of an intellectual puzzle, the Enigma codes, that kind of keeping us guessing, trying to work things out. We've discussed before that this strives for a level of authenticity, even though it's set in a kind of supernatural or an unreal world. There are aspects of this which we would consider to be authentic, and a lot of that comes through the characters, the empathy we have with the audiences, the identification points we make. We mentioned before the escapism, the diversion. This is a show which has thrills and spills, wants us to be feeling as well as thinking. There's the aesthetics. This is not just a zombie drama show, is it? This is inspired by French poetic realism, that aesthetic pleasure. It has a dream-like quality to it. Identification with stars or characters, but also moral messages, the ideologies of the show. What does it make us think of? Do we agree with that? Does it encourage us to explore areas with a bit more depth? The feeling of catharsis, do we really get it? Do we, with certain storylines, like to see what's unfolded in the way that we expect? Or does the fact that we get that sense of catharsis challenged? And then narrative pleasures, things like recognition of patterns, which then get varied, that flexi-narrative approach to the show as well. And finally, voyeurism, scopophilia. This is a character drama, almost has soap opera-esque qualities at certain points. Do we just enjoy watching people's lives unfold and the decisions they make? And in your opinion, what would you say is the most important of these to the encoders, the people who made the show? So if you were able to identify what you felt were the most important appeals to the people who were writing and directing this show, then we should be able to apply Stuart Hall's reception theory fairly easily. So 3 things to do this. What would you say is the preferred meaning of the returned? In other words, what are the messages, the ideologies, the underlying codes that are being discussed, that we're encouraged to think about? How is this encoded? So what would you say are the main ways in which those key ideologies are put to us? And then finally, what other readings might this text generate? How can this be read in other ways? With so much ambiguity, there are, of course, different ways the text could be read, and some of those, hint, we have explored in our look at representations. Okay, so there's one theorist to go, and you knew it was going to be Henry Jenkins, because we have to look at the fandom surrounding this show, even though it's a few years old now, and maybe that fandom has kind of died off a little bit. As you know, we think of Henry Jenkins as talking about fans getting progressively more and more into the thing that they are a fan of. So he talks about these 3, if you like, levels of fandom. Fans can be active participants in constructing and circulating textual meanings, okay? In other words, they spread the message, and sometimes they read things, they offer their own readings of texts. Moving on to the second point is that sometimes these readings are not always fully authorised by media producers. In other words, we get what we call textual poaching, fan fiction and the like. And then finally, this highest level of fandom, if you will, is where people actually construct their own identities through borrowing and using these cultural images. Okay, they become part of the participatory culture where they actually are very involved with the text that they are fans of. First of all, where might you look to find out about how the fan base for a TV show like this has represents itself and interacts with one another? And of course, do some research online. Find out what fandom The Returned exists. Okay, how far do people take that fandom, and decide where on Jenkins' list of forms of fandom are they. Put some links in. Okay, collect if you like a scrapbook of fandom. Okay, these can be social media posts that you take screenshots of. They can be images. They can be links to fan fiction itself. Okay, but just keep yourself aware of the different fandom that exists out there. And that's all for this session. You should have been able to apply a number of different theories, looked at classification, appeals and responses, and all of those things will set you up really well for the exam. Okie dokie, thanks very much for listening, and au revoir.